Be running through the theoretical process of chunking. So in the last video in this kind of mini-series, what I did was went through frustum culling and how it works in my game. Now what we're going to be going through today is something a little bit different, which I don't have in my game. I tried to implement it a while back and basically it got very complicated very quickly, but this is going to be theoretically how you would go about doing it. And you'll find it in most games. Well, not most actually. There's a select few. So Minecraft is a main example of it. Obviously we're in 2D. I'm not sure whether Terraria does it or not, but it may well do. I think it's just frustum culling though. But this is going to be the theoretical process of chunking. So as you can see, this is my world that's been randomly generated, and this current world is pretty large. In fact, I think it's about the biggest it can possibly be without GameMaker crashing, and this is due to the fact that it's not built for huge worlds and DS grids, and eventually it gets too large to fit in one DS grid. So imagine this is our current world, like that. Now that is the maximum size that GameMaker can possibly handle. Okay. Now imagine we took another one and made another DS grid. So this is grid 1, this is grid 2, and then what if we just place these next to each other like this? See? So we've got our first world, which is this world here, and then we've pieced in a second world. Now this is the idea of chunking. So there's two ways of going about it. The first way is you make one massive grid which just covers the whole lot like that, and the other method is by creating a second, is making one grid and then making another grid like that. So the two different ways of making chunking. And basically with this, you can just take these, copy it, you can just keep adding on. It can keep getting larger and larger and larger infinitely long. The only problem is each time you have to generate something else in. And that leads me on to the next thing. So the problem with having this, if this is the maximum theoretical size, then we can only have one of these loaded in at once. Now, I'm just going to get rid of this for the moment. Imagine we have this. This is where our view is at the moment. Whoa. This is our view. Okay. Now, yeah, this is the view, and we can only see this one chunk. We're just saying it's a very small chunk. It only takes up one screen's width and height. Now the problem is if we try and walk off the edge, we have to load in the next chunk. So you see here, this is our next chunk. Now the problem is the loading between them takes a lot of time, and there'll be a freeze, there'll be some stuttering, and it won't look very great. And that will be a problem most of the time, unless you do something which I'm setting up here. In which you effectively load in everyone in a specific area. So you can see here, this middle one, that is where we can currently see. This is the current chunk. Now a world can be this large for all we know, but we're only looking at this specific little chunk in the middle. Now if we want to move into the next one, all these outside ones, they're still loaded in. So all these are loaded. You see? So even though we're only viewing this chunk, we're only ever in this chunk, if we try and move to this next chunk, it's already loaded in. So that the code is already there, so there's no stuttering and there's no lag. So that is the ideal way of doing it. And then once you're in this one, it can then load in the next lot, which is here, And then this is the important bit, is it unloads them. So we move to this one, this becomes just another loaded chunk, and we move along like that. So you can see we're always loading 9 chunks in at once, and that's how you would always work it. And this way we're only using 9 chunks worth of memory. We're not using this whole massive lot of memory if we're making a huge world, and it would mean that overall the whole thing's a lot smoother in game. I'm just going to go on to another quick point though, to do with the problems with these. That's alright. So imagine our world is completely flat, which it isn't. As you can see here, it's bumpy like this. And imagine that our second world is completely flat, but on our second world it's flat at a different height, because if you make these separate, remember I was saying if you do the whole grid at once and then split it up, if you make these two as separate entities and then load them together, you run the risk of potentially having one randomly generated thing, and it looks, I'll try and draw it, but it looks a little bit more like that, but if it ends up there and your other one starts up here, then that's not good, because obviously there's a massive gap there. It could even be greater, it could end way down there, that was awful, and you could have a huge jump that isn't navigatable at all. So that is quite a considerable flaw with the chunking, but overall it's quite a useful thing to add in, but it is very, very time consuming. So of course adding it means changing the whole world generation, so either splitting up one main grid or making lots of separate grids and sewing them together. And also you need some sort of central grid. Now this is kind of confusing, but if you imagine we're going back to our other thing where we've got lots of little ones, I'm not going to draw them out, but just imagine we've got all of our little ones. Now each one, okay, yeah, we're just going to stop there. Each one of these little things will need a grid number, so to hold those grid numbers we need one large grid, you see, to hold all of these little chunks. So we almost need a grid to hold the chunks, and it starts to get rather confusing once you get past that. But yeah, that is realistically all you need to know, is that the chunking methods, the different types of chunking, and how you could go about it. So yeah, imagine these are our chunks. That kind of turned out alright. Imagine this is chunk 1, this is chunk 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we want to access chunk 3 and load in chunk 3, it's not just going to be chunk 3, is it? Because it's 3 along and 3 up, so it's 3, 3. So it's like another grid, effectively. You know, this isn't 1. This is actually 1, 3. It's like a grid. So yeah, that's kind of how you do it. There is no real simple way of doing chunking. It does take a lot of time, and personally it wasn't something I wanted to do, because I thought this was still pretty big, and the frustum culling means it's no stress on the CPU and memory. So yeah, it's up to you whether you add it or not. But for example, you can potentially make infinite sized worlds with it, like Minecraft, and that is, if that's something that interests you, you could definitely look into the chunking, and I'd be happy to see if anyone creates any chunking examples that could show me. I think that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, if you like this video, remember to like, subscribe, or do as you want to do, and I'll talk to you in the next one.